Hey, thank you for joining us. It is a new season at Behind the Mic Conversations of Hope. If you're new, welcome. Our goal is to share conversations of hope from guests with amazing stories that will encourage you and point you to Jesus, even in the darkest times. All right, well, welcome back to Behind the Mic Conversations of Hope. I am Mike Stone, your host, and I have a familiar face with me today. It's Amanda Valentine from our Thursday segment, Hope Worth Repeating. Amanda, great to have you.
Thanks so much, Mike. It's great to be here. It's great to have started the podcast and be hearing feedback, and so thankful to join you tonight.
Yeah, that's been a great segment. I think that I get really winded or windy, I should say, and my podcasts are about 45 minutes. So I think that we have a great audience that wants to hear a lot less of me and more of you. So grateful for that. Amanda, you have someone that looks very similar to you. Can you tell us who that is?
I can. I have been blessed, my whole life to have a sister, a twin sister, identical twin sister. We have some differences in our hair and things like that, but we have been together since the beginning. God has done some things in our lives to keep us strong in relationship when it seemed like that might change. But I get to introduce you today to my best friend, and that is my twin sister, Mariah. And so, Mariah, welcome to the podcast. We're so welcome. We're so thankful.
Yes.
To have you today.
I'm glad to be here.
Now, I'm just curious. Do you guys live close together?
We do now.
You do now.
We didn't for a long time. We were, many years.
I ask because I know some twins myself, and it seems like that they're just inseparable. I mean, they live close to one another. They kind of still do the same things together. So I had to ask that. I don't have any twins in my family, so I may ask some more stupid twin questions that you guys can answer for me today. So
okay, ask away. I left home around 18 for college, and then really didn't come back except for a couple of years in the Central Ohio area. So just in the last 2 years have we been reconnected and been able to live in the same area, actually like 8 minutes apart. Nice. And I'm over at their house for dinner all the time, so it's kind of amazing that I'm at my house tonight.
There you go. Could have done this together,
she
right?
Said it.
She said it. Yeah. Does she ever leave a tip?
Oh, lots of tips. I give lots of tips and
advice.
I'm talking monetary.
There's no money
I'm talking
involved.
monetary.
There's no money.
Okay. Hint, hint. There we go.
Yeah. Listen, I am the gift.
All right. I can see where we're headed with this, so I'm gonna step in. On the screen here, at least recording, you guys are on the center and the right, and I'm on the left, so maybe I should be between you. I don't know if that would help or not, but maybe we'll put that way on the actual podcast show. So, well, Mariah, we are grateful that you're here. I've heard a little bit of your story. That's what this podcast is all about, is stories. We also believe that when we have the courage enough to share stories, especially those that are difficult, it can help others. And I think that's probably what we're talking about tonight. So why don't you give us a little background? You guys grew up together. Amanda, you went to college. Was that Bible college, by the way? You weren't that young, were you? Really?
I was 18, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Because I knew you in Bible college, and I mean, you looked 18, but you don't look however old you are now. You still look like you're right around that early 20s, both of you. So
thank you.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So anyway, you went to college. Mariah, what did you do at that point? You guys were 18.
I started raising a baby.
You did? Okay, tell us about that.
I did. I attended for high school, I actually ended up going to the high school that I never wanted to go to. It was our rival growing up. And so we were just kind of taught to hate that school, like really hate it, that everybody in that school was bad. But that's where we went. My senior year, I began dating a gentleman in my youth group, and I became pregnant when I was 17. I found out the night before my homecoming, at Tree. So it was in December. It was in December. I can't even think of the year right now.
96.
96. Thank you.
96 or 86?
96.
I'm talking
96.
80s. You guys are younger.
86. So. I was 7.
You were so you were here. Okay, you were here.
Yeah,
Usually I say
here.
things like that, and people are like, I wasn't even born yet. Okay, so.
No, I was born. I was born.
So last week on our podcast, we also had Val, who was on and talked to us about being 17 and pregnant. So similarities there.
Yeah.
And you guys haven't heard that one yet because we just recorded that, but very similar stories. So yeah, tell us what that was like for you. Unexpected.
That was really hard. Very unexpected. Really difficult. Just not something that you expect to happen in your life when you've grown up in church. You're very involved in church. You're in a Christian school. Very involved in school. It's crazy how, as a teenager, I really thought this cannot happen to me. There's no way. And then when it did, it was a shock. Both my husband now and Josh and I, we were fearful of telling our parents. Just the church that we grew up in was very legalistic. So anytime that you felt like you failed, you thought, man, this is it. Like it's over. My Christianity is done. So telling my parents actually went much better than I expected. I think when you're kids, you don't realize all the crazy things your parents did. It doesn't hit you that maybe they experienced some pretty bad stuff too. But, they stopped right there, what they were doing. We were in the kitchen at my parents' and they prayed for us. And that was very meaningful. I wasn't there when my husband told his parents. But it wasn't mean. It wasn't anything. He thought he'd be kicked out, just all kinds of things, but that didn't happen. So there was a lot of grace when it came to our parents, which was great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The school, not so much.
Really? Yeah.
No.
Well, I was going to say, we talk about our parents doing some crazy things too. My kids are just starting college, so they don't know any of that stuff yet. So I'll make sure they don't listen to this podcast because they think we're pretty straight-laced. So yeah. Well, that's interesting. Now, so what was the issues with the school? This was a Christian school.
This is a Christian school, and they have a code. I want to say code of ethics, but that's nursing. But they have a conduct code is a better word.
Sure.
That you sign when you come. And I mean, I don't know many freshmen that read everything on the conduct code. They just sign it. I understand. I'm not the kind of person that's like, they should have done something special for me. It was very difficult at the time because there were so many different ways of treating different people. People were, if their parents were giving to the school, then they were treated much differently than parents that were not contributing. Or, it was difficult to sit in a meeting where I already felt terrible, like the biggest failure. And to be told that in order to graduate and get my diploma, I would have to stand in front of my class and confess my sin. And I don't fault my parents for this, but I don't know why they didn't say anything in that moment. I think about that sometimes, but as a 17-year-old, I was just like, I need a diploma. So this is something that I got to do. So I asked the question, if I do that, will I be able to walk in my graduation? And they said, no, you still won't be able to walk, but you will receive a diploma in the mail. So that was really disheartening. Really, just really hurtful.
Yeah, and Amanda, you grew up in, the same household, so Christian background, everything. You were going to Bible college. So what was your take on this? Since you're here, we have twins, so I get to ask both of you, what was your perspective on this as this was going down? I mean, that seems kind of contradictory to our Christian faith.
I honestly, back then, was not surprised because of the culture that we were in as far as legalism and different cultures we experienced in our school. Now, I'm thankful to say that today that school has come a long way. My kids attend there, and there's been much grace extended. But then it was different. Yeah. And it was very hard to see my sister go through that. She was my best friend in high school. Our lockers were next to each other. And then one day she was just gone. And I realized I hadn't done a great job making friends because I knew that she was always my friend. Yeah. So it was very difficult. It was hard for me because there was gossip going around. And I remember the first time and only time ever slamming someone against the locker because they were spreading untrue rumors about what happened. And I remember my band teacher, who was my favorite teacher, pulled me aside and said, come in my office and talk to me. And that saved me from really getting bitter was him. And also being there for my sister kept me, focused on her and not on how it was affecting me. She went through a lot of sickness, and we were up in the middle of the night, together, and she lived at home for the first however long, 6 months or so of her baby's life. And, I was right there, and I was really hurt. I remember at graduation, though, I made it a point to say her name from the stage and to sing a song that I dedicated to her from the stage because everyone in our class believed she should be a part. So that was something that we all agreed on. Yeah.
That's awesome. So you pushed somebody against the locker. That's awesome.
I did.
That's what I got out of all
little, that. This little girl. It was a little girl.
That's what I wondered. What happens when that just natural takes over, like Mama Bear? In this case, it was "Don't mess with my sister." That's real. I like that.
It's real.
Yeah, I like that.
It's real.
I'm
It
kidding.
was like, don't say one more word, or you will pay.
Yeah, and you never. I'm guessing you never took judo or any of that stuff, but it just took over, which is great. Mariah's going, no way. So, but I'm saying, yeah, it was just the natural, whatever it is, it was going to come out. Yeah. So, that's pretty amazing because you don't see that from Amanda. But I'm going to remember that now through this whole interview. I'm going to think about Amanda. I'm glad we're at a distance. So, so then you were at your parents for about 6 months, and Amanda, you went to Bible college. What took place then? What was it like? So did you end up getting married right away then, or what happened after that?
No. During the pregnancy, my husband's dad didn't want him to propose right away because he stated he didn't want us to get married just because I was pregnant. He wanted to make sure that it was a good situation, which as an adult now with children of my own, totally get. As a 17-year-old with a growing, swelling belly and nothing on the finger to show for it, it was really hard. And I wondered, was I good enough before I was pregnant, but now it's an issue And do you realize that your son played a role in this? So there was a lot of hurt going on that now am I less than because of this, where you don't want him to propose. But as I look back now, in hindsight, we were very young. Things were happening very fast. I wasn't going to be going to college anymore, and I had planned on going to Bible college as well. So there was a lot happening, and Josh had not decided what he wanted to do with his life. So I think in retrospect, his dad was just really looking out for, let's make sure that you guys are in a better spot.
Yeah.
So we didn't get engaged until it was probably, I think it was maybe 4 days after Grace was born. My dad wanted to put my last name on the birth certificate because of custody issues down the road. He said, this is just the way to go. I shared that with Josh, and Josh was very hurt. And he went to my dad, and I always tell Josh, his conversation with my dad was better than his proposal.
I'm sure there probably at that point there was a lot more thought that went into that conversation with your dad, right?
There was. So he's crying to my dad, telling him, I'm going to be there for her. I'm going to be there to raise Grace. This is who I want for my wife. I want to marry her. And then this is terrible. And so that meant a lot to my dad. So my dad was like, okay, there's ways to change this. We'll put your last name on it, but you need to make a commitment now. So he came downstairs and just sat on the couch next to me, said, do you want to marry me? Yep. So
did he have the ring?
So that was it. He had the ring. So at least he had the ring.
Yes.
He put a ring on it. Mike. So that was good. It was a lot, and there was already a lot going on. But just in that moment, there was this sense of, okay, maybe I'll belong. I'll feel like we're a normal family, even though I feel like my life has taken this huge detour. Maybe once we're married, everything will feel normal. Because high school, I had a bunch of friends, and then I didn't have any friends. All these people saying, I'm going to come over, we'll hang out, I want to be there when the baby's born. And there was nobody to be seen. So when then my sister left for college, I thought, man, it's great being with my parents. They're helpful, but it's time for me to be a mom, and I want to be a wife. So that's when the engagement began.
Wow.
Yes.
And
then I came back for the wedding. They were actually married on Valentine's Day.
Nice.
And my niece we've always had a special connection. And they are actually this coming Valentine's Day, celebrating their 25th anniversary. We are doing that together in Hawaii. So
nice.
We're looking forward to that.
Nice. I've got to say, I'm going to cut you off there just because I have to say we wanted to get married on Valentine's Day, but it didn't work out that year. So we got married on the 13th, but it was in honor of Valentine's Day. So we were actually engaged on the 13th. So it ended up being like
that?
I don't know. At the time it was Valentine's Day, hearts, the love, all that stuff. So that was kind of the way. Yeah, that was kind of the way it was. But Valentine's Day fell on a Sunday, I believe. So it did. So we got married on Saturday the 13th. So anyway, we'll be celebrating our 35th on the 13th next week.
Congratulations.
Couple weeks.
That's
so
wonderful.
Yeah. So Amanda, I'm sorry I had to cut you off, but
that's okay.
I think it's pretty cool. The 14th. That's
I was just going to mention that, there's been, a lot of people can put, okay, we've been married from this year to this year, and there's just that hyphen there. And there's so much that happens in that hyphen on the journey to make it to 25 years. Statistics are against anybody making it 25 years.
That's right.
And they Josh and Mariah have certainly gone through difficult seasons to make it this far. I mean, honestly, against all odds, you know, they are making it, and they are living. Their marriage is a miracle, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's all, you know. Part of Mariah's story is what happened after all of that, and getting pregnant so young. You know, not having a life. You go from high school to parenthood to marriage to what now? You know, another baby in 3 years, another baby in 3 years, another baby in 2 years. And then life kind of smacks you in the face and you go, now what? And some of that started to kind of stir in their marriage. And that's part of her story that I definitely think is important for people to hear, because it's easy to say, oh, 25 years. Wow, that's just for saints, you know, only
right.
Get 25 years. But no, it's very much imperfect marriages that make it 25 years. So, Mariah, what do you want people to know about your story that could give them hope if even their marriage is struggling right now?
Yeah.
For me, I really thought there was no hope. I had made so many wrong choices trying to feel something for many years. Choices that hurt peace, not just my husband, my children, my family, my sister. Choices that I didn't care if they hurt anybody, because I felt like I was at a point in my life where I went from my parents' house to parenthood to being married, and I had never experienced life outside of that. And I would tell myself, man, I'm just stuck here. I'm stuck. And I would find all the negatives about being stuck there instead of what can we do to make this work? There is a way to make this work. What can we do to make this work? That wasn't something that we tried. And I'll say the first time around, because part of my story is we were divorced and remarried. That didn't work. We did not work the first time around because we were not willing to look at the other person and say, what do you need? Instead, it was, you're not giving me what I need. You aren't willing to do that. There is hope. There's absolutely hope. If my marriage made it, I believe most marriages can make it. And I say most because there have to be two willing parties.
That's right.
You can't will somebody else to change into the person you want them to be. It cannot happen. I've tried it. I've prayed. I've hoped. I've believed. But unless that person is willing to say and accept that they have responsibility as much as you have responsibility, own that and work on it, it's not going to work, because marriage is two people.
That's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you guys, you would have been 18 when your baby was born, correct?
Yes.
And then shortly after that, or was it before, shortly in that time frame, you were married?
Yes,
so,
we were married 6 months after.
So you really did go from really being a teen, being a teen and a mom at the same time, and then going right into marriage. My wife was 19 when we got married. And I just know at our young ages, man, I guess it was God's grace. But you have a totally different view or perspective on what marriage is going to be like when you're that young than you do if you wait a little bit. And so I can relate to that. It's hard. 35 years is by God's grace and by God being in the center of our marriage. He wasn't always there. He's not always there. You know, even now, we are selfish people. So what did that look like for you?
This is the really hard part of my story for me. This is why sharing my story is very difficult, because it takes a level of vulnerability that when you deal with shame most of your life, the level of vulnerability, it's very hard to break through that curtain of shame. because you think, oh, this is it. That the ball's going to drop and everybody's going to be like, that's who you are. And you think all of a sudden you're going to be Mariah, and I'll say adulterer. That all of a sudden I'm afraid that's going to become my identity. People aren't going to see how much I've grown. They're not going to see that I've come from here to here. They're going to be like, yep, Mariah the adulterer. So that's where I have to remind myself that that's not who I am anymore by God's grace. Amen. That every day he gives me new mercies. And every day that I feel like I'm failing or I feel shame, he reminds me of where he's brought me from.
Amen.
One thing that really stood out to me when I was coming out of this, I kept studying different, biblical heroes, like we call them in the church. And on every story I read, there was always an after that. So after Moses failed, after that, after Job went through stuff, after that. And I had to keep telling myself, this is not the end of my life. I have the chance to have an after that moment. After I made all of these terrible decisions, hurt the people around me, made myself look terrible, and did not care. There is still an after that for somebody like me. And I want people to understand, if there's an after that for somebody like me, there's an after that for somebody like you.
That's right.
Because that's how amazing God is. Amen. God doesn't look at you and say, it's too much. I'm sorry, washing my hands. It's too much. I can't do anything with you. I can't do anything with your marriage. I can't heal your children. Everything's just too broken. Done. There's an after that. And I thank God for that. Because, Amen. Let's see, 2008, 2009, in that year I had my first affair. It was an emotional affair. It led up, I'll give some background. My husband and I were pastors for a while. I felt very involved as a pastor's wife. I loved being a youth pastor's wife, scheduling all these different things, hanging out with the girls. I didn't have a degree myself, so it kind of gave me the ability to have some leadership without having a degree because I couldn't go to school because of my situation. And my husband was not happy in that role. There was not support. There was really no mentoring. You very much felt alone in your role. We went to a conference and he believed that, and we've talked about this multiple times, but he believed that he was given permission to do his dream job in that, and that was to be a pilot. And I was like, okay, sure. Not understanding what that meant. I did not understand as still a young mother. I was pregnant with my third child at that time. Not understanding what that would look like. So he was taking private pilots lessons at Ohio State, and then we had to move to Florida for him to complete his commercial pilot. Mm-hmm. And in that move was the first time I ever experienced actual major depression, mental health. Depression runs in my family. I never experienced the type of depression I experienced. I experienced a lot of fear, and I actually started to have physical pain. Like I couldn't lift my head off the pillow. I felt very alone. I knew nobody. Nobody in my apartment complex spoke English. Josh was never home. He was in school. He was flying. Very, very alone. My son broke his head open while we were down there, and I sat in an emergency room for hours. And it was really difficult. The loneliness that set in. Yeah. But I was like, it's going to get better. We're going to get better. So when we came back, Josh was looking for a job, and he got one. When a pilot first starts out, they start at the very bottom. Everything's seniority based. So you end up with the worst schedule you can imagine in your entire life, and you start on reserve, but you have to be at the airport. So he would be gone for 5 days a week. And I had 3 kids, and I know how this happens, but it happened again. We had a 4th. So very overwhelming time for me. 4 children. He was gone 5 days a week. And My husband's a very quiet man. He's come a long way, but then didn't share emotions. There was really no emotional connection at all. We got to the point where we really didn't communicate when he was gone. And some very hurtful things were said during that time. Like, you don't have to be the first person I think about. You don't have to be, just because we didn't understand each other. I was at home working my behind off, I felt like. And then I would picture him in my head in these beautiful places in this hotel, just sitting away by himself. And I'm here suffering, for Jesus and the children, and just didn't think I was going to make it. I felt very alone. So the first person that told me how amazing I was and that Josh should recognize that. And I didn't like this person. But for some reason that triggered something in me, something that I was longing for, something I was missing. And we began texting, and that lasted for a couple weeks. But even though that lasted for a couple of weeks, it started something in me. Something in me that wasn't good, and that I didn't completely get rid of. I let the root stay. Mm-hmm. I went to counseling. I did all the things I was supposed to do to save my marriage. But I didn't do what I needed to do to realize that God is everything I needed. I was still looking for that everywhere else, looking for affirmation, looking for validation. We lived a lot closer to my husband's parents, and they weren't as supportive as my parents are. There wasn't really much help. I really wasn't allowed to ask them for help. It was a really difficult season, really, really bad.
Yeah.
And that continued.
Mm-hmm. It's hard raising kids. Our situation was when I graduated from Bible college, I was actually at the airport working for those 4 years. So I know what you're talking about. Those pilots that I knew as friends were gone all the time, the regional airlines and things like that. And but when we moved here to Ohio, we now had 2 kids, very young kids. One adopted, one was birthed to us just after we got here. And I began traveling for my ministry job. And we talk about that a lot. And there was just 2 of them. Mm-hmm. And we had a little bit of help here. Not a lot, but we had a little bit of help. So I can relate to that just a little bit, and it's hard. And my wife could probably really empathize with you. All the nights the kids were sick, and I was, like you said, in a nice hotel, eating well, in the quiet.
Yeah. And that was hard. I let bitterness and resentment really take over, and just kind of stopped fighting it. I let it eat me alive and give me thoughts of, I deserve better. I deserve better than this. I deserve emotional support, physical support. Sometimes I look back and I think, and this is just a question that comes to me, if I would have just filed for divorce then, maybe I wouldn't have caused all of this hurt. But in my journaling, divorce was the biggest sin you could commit when we were being raised. Like, there was you were not doing that. Whatever you had to do to make it work, you were going to do to make it work, because the rules for divorce were, well, you're going to be single the rest of your life, and you're not allowed to be, seen in public with jewelry on, and blah, 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 blah. Like, I just thought, why would I do that? And how would I support myself? What would I do to support myself? But it was actually my husband's idea for me to go to nursing school. So he actually really helped me gain some confidence to have a career, which enabled us to be able to divorce eventually, to actually start working on ourselves, which desperately needed to happen. And I know in Christian circles, it's almost taboo to say we needed to get divorced. But I'm going to tell you right now, we needed to get divorced, because the road that I was headed down was not a good road. And I needed a wake-up call. I needed a severe wake-up call, not just, you can't do this anymore, but I cannot be in a relationship with someone that I can't trust, is not trustworthy, is lying to me, is hurting our family. That was a big wake up call for me.
Yeah. And I want to just jump in and say, and during this time, 2009, we stopped being close because of the lies. And I would feel like we were making progress, and then I would find out I was being lied to. And I finally had to set a boundary and say, I can't trust you. And I can't take your word on things. And so I have to step out. And that was mostly to protect my own heart. That's what boundaries are for, to protect us, not to punish other people.
That's right.
Right? It was not a punishment. It was, I can't keep watching you go down this path. I can't.
Yeah.
Something else is going to have to happen. And maybe when you realize and you get to that place where you've lost everybody, maybe at that point, you'll find God. And he'll be able to restore you. There was a time when we weren't speaking, and we met and we talked, and then we would talk for a little while, and then we wouldn't talk anymore because I'd find something out. And it was very, very hard, I remember, in that time, because I would get these phone calls, telling Mariah, tell your sister what you did. Tell her what you did. Tell her what you're doing to the family. And it was ripping my heart out.
Yeah.
And so we talk a lot about how, our own decisions, our own choices have a ripple effect that goes so much farther than ourselves.
Yeah.
And often we don't see that ripple effect because we're causing it. And it takes some outside force, just like Newton's law, right, of inertia. She was rolling, she was moving on this path, and it was going to take a force greater than herself to get her back on that path. As a twin, when people would say, I would love to be a twin, you must be so close, no, we aren't close, I would just kind of avoid the question.
Yeah.
So there was, besides her husband, who I kept in touch with because of our kids seeing each other, there was no connection. And that was very hard for her, I know, because even in facing it, she felt like she was facing it alone.
Yeah.
But I want to say that during that time, she was never alone. The Holy Spirit, the prayers, so many prayers, so many nights, so much fasting,
yeah.
To so many conversations with my parents, about things. And this is how you can help her. This is how you're not helping her.
Right.
That was hard. That was hard. But Mariah, I'm proud of you because you let God get a hold of you. You have finally allowed him in. You came to a place where you said, no more, no more, no more. And this could be a very different story.
Yeah.
This could be had you not surrendered to his grace and really allowed yourself the opportunity to feel his grace in the midst of your shame.
Yes.
So my question for you is, there are so many people walking around in shame. And even in our churches, people do not feel like they can be authentic with who they are. Every church has that, welcome home, or, we're family here, or we're so real, we're authentic, we share things. But when people are called up for prayer afterwards, barely anyone comes. And the people that do come, they may share 90%, but there are very few that get to the final 10% of what's really going on in their lives.
For sure.
So what do you want to say to someone who feels they are beyond God's grace? They're beyond. There's no getting back. What do you want to say to that person?
That's just not true. That's not possible. I think a lot of times we compare the love of God to the love of people because we can't really comprehend how can somebody love me through all of this. So we think, well, would my dad still love me through all of this? Would my husband still love me through all this? Would my brother? And we think, no, there's no way. So we just assume God's the same. God cannot love me through this. But God was the only one that did not leave me. I mean, that's when you can say that, like, truly, just the truth. Like, I had nobody. When you can say God is the only one that didn't leave me, and you put you're in a place where He's all you have, you start to understand the love of God. That it does not matter. It does not matter what you've done. Especially as a parent now, when I look at my kids, they do some dumb stuff. They really do. I mean, they've done some really dumb stuff. But that's never changed how I felt about them. That's never changed what I would do for them. Yeah. I adore them. And God's love is on a whole other level. I mean, I look at somebody that I hate, and God loves them, right? Yeah. Like the person that I talk bad about in counseling, God loves them. Right? Yeah. So God loves you already, is what I would say. He adores you. He created you. You're made in His image because He loves you. There's nothing like God's love. Nothing.
We hear all the time in the church some of those things, but this is coming from somebody who was so low in that shame, and you were there. You know, it's easy for someone who's got this gravy life to say, yes, God's always there for you. But when you talk to somebody that's been through it, and they can stand and testify that they know firsthand that God does not leave us, forsake us. He's always there. He's always pursuing us because He loves us. It makes you stand up and listen. And I think maybe all of us have been there to some extent, because I don't think any of your sin is any worse than my sins, to be perfectly honest. Right. I think if we feel like there are people that are more sinful than us, we need to really take a deep look at ourselves, because people that come on this show and share stories like yours of the deep shame, we talk a lot about pornography here, and that's such a secret sin. Nobody wants to talk about that. So how horrible is that to God? But you know what? I'm not going to reveal all of my sins here, because I know they're just as bad as you. And yours are just as bad as mine. And that's the way it works. We needed a Savior. That's why Jesus came. And I think in our society, we look so much, like you said, at the outside, and we can go to church, and we can walk through the doors and shake hands with a smile on our face. And that's okay if we have the ability to be transparent and say, my life is garbage without Christ. If we can say that, it's okay to walk out of your car and shake hands and smile, knowing that your self-worth, you're not, like you said, Mariah the adulterer, because I've got lots of things that I can tag titles onto myself too, but that's not our identity. That's not who we are. Right. And to recognize that is to really understand God's grace and His mercy. Well, we're going to take a pause here, and we will be back next week with the remainder of Mariah's story. And you don't want to miss this. God's grace is all over this, and it's going to come together next week when we wrap this up. I want to thank Mariah and Amanda both for sharing this important story with us. Listen, whether you're dealing with teen pregnancy or have an affair in the past or any of those things or not, this is for everyone. It's about God's grace. It's about Him meeting us where we are and not cleaning ourselves up to be who he's called us to be. So we'll see you next week for part 2 with Mariah and Amanda, right here on Behind the Mic, Conversations of Hope. And remember, if your life is grounded in Jesus, even in the darkest times, there is hope.